Welcome back to the Apprentice One-to-One podcast. I'm your host, Mark Allison, and I've been super excited and equally nervous about this episode because my guest tonight, as far as I'm concerned, is the Mount Everest of the apprenticeship system and wider training in general. He'll be sat there shaking his head because he won't agree with me, but he's going to have to listen because I've got with me the GSH content creator, the Efix founder and presenter, whatever we're calling him in that role. Decades of teaching experience. There's loads of sparks out there now. We're all qualified thanks to this man. And it is Gary Hayes. How are you this evening, Gary? Thank you very much for coming on, first and foremost.
Thank you for the, first of all, the invite and the generous introduction. But I'd like to start by talking without you talking, because I'd like to say that the electrical industry owes a massive debt to you, Mark, and maybe you're not getting the credit that you deserve before you try and give me any credit. With over 300 people in this industry during COVID that were lost, couldn't continue on their apprenticeship for whatever reason because of the pandemic or because of the situation they were in at work, and then somebody decided to take it on themselves and create something that probably didn't realise it was going to be so important as it is. Now, whatever I've done in all my time, it pales into insignificance to what you've done, Mark. And I think I'd like to say on behalf of everybody you've helped and everybody you're going to help, what you've done is amazing. Too many awards get given to people across the country that don't deserve them. And if there's ever an award that comes your way for what you've done, Mark, you thoroughly deserve it. And I'd like to say on behalf of all the apprentices you've helped, thank you very much and keep up the great work, Mark. Right, you can go now.
Wow. Coming from yourself, that means a lot, Gary, but you know, I'm not having that. You're far and away way above anything I could ever be doing at the minute. But anyway, let's get back to why you're here. It's brilliant that you've come on to discuss the apprenticeship system. I'm chuffed to bits that you actually are here talking to me. But would you briefly give your background? I'm sure most people know already, so I won't make you run over the whole thing. But how did you come into being an electrician in the first place and then end up in lecturing? Let's start there.
I'll give you the real whistle-top tour. Mum and Dad both worked in factories. Their ideal job for their son was a tradesman because it was better than working in a factory, and for their daughter was to work, say, in something office-based. They would really like their daughter, my sister, to work in a bank. She did. She worked in Barclays Bank, and they really would like me to work for Eastman's Electricity. And believe it or not, I went off and worked for Eastman's Electricity. And I'd imagine now, being a parent myself, if your kids can do the sort of things that you want them to do, I'd like to suggest they should do what they would want to do themselves. I was very manipulated to a certain degree. I got into that. I loved my apprenticeship. I went through that. I had a fantastic apprenticeship, worked with some amazing people. Unfortunately, I worked too hard as a younger person, still growing. I've done stories on that. Under 18, I wrecked my back, struggled on till I was about 27, had a couple of jobs in between, and then sort of semi-stumbled into teaching because I'd had a job out of the electrical industry prior to going into teaching. And I looked at everything as a point of electrician. So I had an opportunity to teach in a role that developed into the role that I ended up with. But I sort of went in by default. I would still be sparking. I love being an electrician. I still class myself as an electrician, so I don't say I'm not an electrician, but I would still love to be doing it. It was a physical disability or a physical issue that caused me to become a college lecturer. And I'm so pleased I've done it. I loved every minute of the 19 years I almost completed. I got very close to 19 years. And yeah, that was it really. Just by default, really into teaching, but love being an electrician, still love it. So.
Oh, that's brilliant. And obviously everyone will have seen you with the GSH content while you were with Tresham College. And your direct experience of that is actually quite an interesting point of view as far as Apprentice One-to-One's concerned, because I'm getting a lot of people in touch who have kind of got complaints about the colleges that they're in, not so much the lecturing, but some of the equipment that they're using and the booths they have to work in and things like that. Is that something that is fairly common in your experience, or is it just one-off students that are getting in touch with Apprentice One-to-One maybe?
When I first got to Tresham College, I'd had my training through Eastman's Electricity. They did their own practical training to send us to college for the theoretical side. And I walked into the workshop. I had a fantastically huge workshop, but the walls, the brick, the block and the wooden walls looked like they hadn't been touched in 20 years. So I spent the entire first summer on my own, replacing every single joist on the top and every single wood board on the back. And then they got bricklayers in to do the block work. So the first proper year I started afresh. So I was in a lovely position. But when you've got something that's brilliant to start with them, we maintained that. So we sanded the walls down. We never put pen marks on it. we did everything. We cleaned, the lads cleaned the windows and the radiators for me in the early years. They'd do anything I asked them to do. And then slowly but surely that progressed into, well, when I first started, the consumer units have rewirable fuses. So I walked in and I went, we don't fit those anymore. So I eventually got those out the window, and slowly but surely, a bit at a time. But I took ownership of it. I think a lot of colleges probably struggle to have people that take ownership of it. So everybody does a bit in there, then nobody really owns it. And over time, I managed to get good stuff. But in the same time, I worked myself into a position where I'd been there so many years that I could almost get away with saying stuff and doing stuff, which if you go to college and you've only been there 2 or 3 years, you're still playing yes. Whereas I've been there 5, 6, 7, 9, 10 years. And all of a sudden, I wasn't playing yes anymore. I was playing, well, I want and I need and I'm expecting. So I worked myself by the amount of time I've been there into a position where I could ask for more stuff maybe than most. And I backed it up with results. So we got very good results, both teaching grades for me personally when people observed me, as well as learners that stayed on the course, which they didn't have a very good record until I turned up. And then people that actually passed out at the end of the course with a qualification. So they found it difficult to say no sometimes, and I played on that as well. So
yeah, so I mean, from your kind of point of view, then it was lecturer led, if you like, wasn't it? You kind of took charge on that and made sure that the booths and things were in place. But it must be quite a hard task because there's the churn of students coming through. There's a lot of holes going in things, a lot of clips going up, a lot of boards being used. So there has to be some investment there for that as well. Do the colleges get the money they need? Is that actually filtered through to the construction side of a college, or could that be arranged differently? Do you think?
I don't think so, no. And my good friend Darren Staniforth would say, if you ever get him on, it's the silver bullet education. There's not enough money goes in at any level, whether that be for staff, and we're not going to talk about paying staff, but again, they probably pay them considerably less than a half decent electrician. So that suggests something that people might make up in their own mind. I went in because I had a bad back. I had no choice. I loved every minute of it. But no, material-wise, a full-time learner, let's go, is probably worth £4,000 per year. It might be 5,000. They do it on weighting. So a normal student's worth 1. An electrical student is worth, say, 1.2. So let's say 1 was £4,000. Obviously, we add 0.2 onto that, okay, in order to get to the value of those. If you go to something like equine with the horses, I think they're nearer a 2 because obviously they've got to work with animals. So, of course, that makes it a more expensive course. You might find ITs down at 0.8 of a value of the £4,000 for a full-time learner. And an apprentice might be worth £18,000 over their completed apprenticeship standards. So if you've got, and that's without even students or rest. If you've got 10 learners in front of you, you never would have 10 learners. You've got £40,000 in the room. So you've got 20, you've got £80,000 in the room. And I'm hearing things like budgets of £4,000 or £5,000 for the whole year for materials and workshops and things like that. Do the maths.
Yeah, and that's it. And in a construction environment, that's got to be one of the most cost-heavy forms of teaching there is, because of the materials you need to demonstrate and teach people how to install. And like you said earlier about still using rewirable fuses when you first started out, even now when they're perhaps using MCBs and such in a college environment, really should we not be putting AFDDs in apprentices' hands and letting them get the experience of them, because they're the most likely to be installing them in 5 years' times when they're more common.
And what gets me is, I've been into a number of colleges, and I never blame the people I see or anything. I always blame people I don't see. So people spend money. You'll go to a board. It'll be metal. It'll be not an Amendment 3 board, as we know, for a domestic dwelling. It'll be a metal one for the old days, maybe a Wilex one when we had those industrial style boards. It will have no guard over the buzz bar. It'll have no RCD on the socket. And I'll be watching them wiring a circuit, and I'm like, well, it might look nice, but you've taught them nothing, because you can't say to someone in the real world, well, you wouldn't fit this, you'd fit an RCBO or an RCD protection on this circuit. You wouldn't go in the top with a grommet because you haven't got IP4X on it. You'd use a gland, but we haven't got any glands. You would put the bar across the buzz bar, but we haven't got one, and we've only got 3 screws in the consumer. I've seen boards with 3 screws in them. And you just think, at some point, unfortunately, the staff have got to step back and just throw them away. When I first got there, I just threw stuff away. I just went, well, where's that? I've thrown it away. I didn't know. I looked at something, it was rubbish. Just chucked it away. They've got to do something about it then. But there's a lot of money attached to, as you just said there, it's weighted above one. So there's more money for an electrical student, whether they be apprentice or not, than there is for a student doing something that needs a calculator and a ruler. So spend the money, but colleges seem very reluctant to do so. And I've been to a few, and it's heartbreaking, really, to be honest. And then we stretch out and say manufacturers should help. That's an easy one. They're running a business at the end of the day, so have got to run their business. Now, if somebody came to me and said, "Oh, okay, you teach, Gary, 45 hours a week or whatever it is, but I need you now to teach another day on a Saturday. Give your time up, go and help these people here." You'd be like, "Oh, yeah, okay." And you're saying the same to a manufacturer. They've got it, I understand, and the rules about if they use it at college, they might use it in the real world and all the rest of it. But colleges shouldn't rely on the fact that a manufacturer may help them. It should be above and beyond. Like you said, my college when I left, Tresham, my college, pull that one back for someone. The College of Tresham College that paid me for employment for 19 years. I've got my FDDs in there. We had SPDs when they first coming in as type 2 in boards. We had as close as we possibly could. They could tell me an ACRCD was useless even when I left, because I had boards that had ACRCD main switches, because it made it easier to say your lighting circuit was on an RCD. Your socket circuit, if you only put one circuit in at a time, was on an RCD. We fiddled the rules slightly, but they could tell me obviously it wasn't acceptable. We didn't like the X, Y, and Z. But when you've got none of that, and you've got a board that's non-compliant, holes in the top, no screws, just a circuit breaker, no RCD, it's a real struggle to put it into context to reality, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It must be very difficult when it's your job to try and get the knowledge into these kids if you don't have the right materials and tools in front of you to do it and for them to use. And it's this is the whole idea of what I'm trying to do, really, is go around people in industry to gather their experiences and opinions on what's going on, because I think as an industry as a whole, perhaps we don't realise what's going on at apprenticeship level. And it's really to try and make more of awareness about that, of how colleges are struggling, and if it's how the money's been spent that's been provided on a local level within a college, or if it's actual government funding isn't enough, or if employers need to be more involved, or even the manufacturers, like you say, and perhaps some of the CPSs setting up some sort of funding to help with the apprenticeship system. I don't really know. And this is the whole purpose of going around having these discussions, and someone who's got your experience teaching day to day for 19 years saying that, that is an issue. I think that's a really important point that industry needs to take note of and perhaps work towards doing something about.
There is some great colleges. Before we go any further sort of bashing the system, I've been to see the guys at Lincoln. I've seen Ian Clark up in Scunthorpe. My mate Richard Harvey, that might even be a guest at some point on here. Fantastic people. Who else have we got? A Northampton guy called, I'm no good with names, I murder names all the time. What are we going for? I only worked with him 3 times. What was his name? I'll come back to me. But these people are doing a great job that I've seen. So it's easy to highlight, and it's the same as social media, in it. Somebody does something, it's easy to highlight the negatives. And I'd never blame apprentices or learners. I get lots of LinkedIn photographs, especially on Instagram now, and I look at it and go, maybe the teaching let him down. And you've been linked in on some of them as well, and you've led some really positive comments about him, nice to see you're improving and things like that, or you've made a really good effort. But that comes down to poor teaching. There's no such thing as a poor learner. There's only a poor teacher, and there's plenty of great ones as well. And I'm not suggesting I was one, but that's an important point that does need referencing. You are spot on, because we do often get drawn down to the negative aspect on things throughout the trade, not just at apprenticeship level. And you are spot on. There's some very, very good colleges out there, and equally there's been lads getting in touch and lasses who've had great apprenticeships and are having great apprenticeships. So it's not everywhere, but I think it's fairly common that there are difficulties. But it's just an interesting point of view that you've given there, and I really appreciate you being so honest with it. I know that's nice to hear. How do you feel about the link with employers into colleges? When you were teaching, did you have much involvement with many of the employers? So if you had a group of apprentices in, would you ever have any engagement with them, or was that more of their assessors who would be? Yeah, that became an issue, because I had a gap in my 19 years where I didn't take the apprentices, and we used training coordinators. So they took the apprentices out of curriculum and they put it into a separate unit. And some colleges up and down the country have used this as a method. And then what they decided was they believed a training coordinator could be, it doesn't matter about the money, but let's say £10,000 less than a lecturer to be a training coordinator, and they would teach the apprentices. Well, the apprentices were worth more money because obviously, the government would like to pay for those apprentices at a certain higher premium, and they had obviously things to set, AM2 to hit and AM2S when it came out. But they actually, in some colleges, got the worst end of the deal. So we had effectively the apprentices potentially looking over their shoulder and going, well, the full-time learners are doing this, and I've got this. And it wasn't a failing again of the staff. And if the staff was watching this, I'd say that, and I'll see him again at some point. It was a failing of the system again. They thought they could do it cheaper. By doing it cheaper, they could make more money. And that's their problem. But I'd say the employer also has got an issue. Now, how many apprentices have you heard that were, say, turned up on day one, look around maybe a small workshop, and there'd be an older guy sitting in the corner, which probably would be me now, and they'd look at the other younger lads maybe with, a little bit of cooler artwork on their body, or, the aspiring lady electrician in the room, and think, don't send me with him. I don't want to go with the old one in the corner. Now, traditionally, when I was an apprentice, I got stuck with the old one in the corner because old Jim, he'll pull you to one side. You won't get away with nothing with old Jim. You'll be in every roof space. You'll have to bend every piece of conduit. You'll have to drag every cable in. But you had 12 months with them, and all of a sudden, he did have time. He was given time to help you, nurture you, and the rest of it. I think now there's too much, and it's not across the whole board, but there's too much, and I'll make it a paraphrase. If you can fit an LED downlighter, you're an electrician. So once the apprentice can bang an LED downlighter in, bang, he can just start fitting the lights. That's not everyone. We know that. We've seen people like, I'm gonna struggle with another name. Who's the Bigfoot? Can't remember his name again. How many podcasts have I watched with him in?
Oh, you mean Neil?
Yeah, Neil says every time, terrible with names. I'm glad this is coming out because I've taught people who have left and come back 2 months later and I can't tell you their names. Neil's a good example, isn't it? Investing in his apprentices, he wants the best apprentices. He don't want them to leave. He doesn't want to invest all that time and leave. Is that a culture that spreads across the UK? Have we got a culture of wanting to take on and nurture an apprentice? And then I don't want to, it's going to look like another kick. If the person teaching the apprentice also had a difficult training period and maybe didn't do as well as they could and, eventually got the qualification, and they then train somebody else, that sort of has a little bit of a knock-on effect, doesn't it? So if you had a poor effort at your apprenticeship through no fault of your own, and then you're given somebody else, maybe you don't know better than you were taught through your system, and that's become a bit of a cascade effect. Not blanketly across the UK. There's great electricians out there training great apprentices, and they're the ones we never hear about. We only hear about the ones that obviously have more difficult and challenging experiences. But they're expected to complete their apprenticeship. It's signed by the employer. It's signed by obviously the people carrying out the apprenticeship, and it's signed by the apprentice. But I'm not sure everybody takes their bit as seriously as they should. And I always say, when the apprentices come into me, and they may be a little bit lively, or they might tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about because the bloke at work says the bonding clamp can go anywhere it likes on a pipe. What are you telling me? It's 600 mil. Why, you can't be right. And you're giving it all that, and anyone who's listening to that was just shoulders out and giving a wobble. And you just stop and show it in the on-site guide, and you highlight the bit and all the rest of it. And it's like that. Why the bloke at work's wrong? I'm not
joining those dots, isn't it? Because that's what I'm mindful, like you've said, about a lot of the people who are reaching out to me are people who are having a difficult time, and there is people out there who are having a brilliant time as well.
There are.
But some of the people's comments coming towards myself are kind of, my employers are sending me off just doing labouring tasks or just repetitive basic stuff. I'm not actually learning anything on my apprenticeship, and that they're also not releasing them to go to college either. So they're making them miss, like, not just the odd week here and there, but 10 weeks in a row in a couple of cases. I'm just wondering if that tie-in with the college and the employer needs to be tighter, so that the college are kind of making sure the students are being released onto their apprenticeship, but also that they're getting the right experience. And if they're not, that there's some kind of mediation, if you like, to make sure that does get put in place.
And that's the role of the training coordinator. They call it different things up and down the country. That is that person's role. So they would be the ones between the conduit between the conduit between the lecturer, the training provider, facility, and obviously the employer and the apprentice, and that sort of loops that circle. But often, and we experienced it at Tresham, we had a really good, when I left, training coordinator, but he probably had 85 people to look after him and a caseload of expected 40. Yeah. So, it's easy to say he probably didn't quite do as much as he could have done, but he did 85 people instead of 40. They'll try and solve that problem, but once they've solved it, another issue comes along. So college-wide, to keep a strong team together. And if you ever get to speak to Richard Harvey, you'll see that his team's been together a long while. That's where the results come. When you can get to a college where the team have been together for an extended period of time, they understand the qualification, but they're not going to, all of a sudden disappear after a free qualification, which effectively broke my heart, because obviously I had to tell my lot. But my wife said to me, it wouldn't matter when you stop doing it, Gary, you wouldn't see somebody through. And people like, Freddie, I've got a name. So like Freddie, when I told the apprentices with that group, Freddie, who I taught as a full-time learner who got a job, I could see him at the side of my eye, and you could just see him shaking his head going like that. And I was like, tears are coming down the eye. I never saw Freddie through. Gutted. But if I'd seen Freddie through, there would have been a new Freddie.
Of course,
so keeping a team together. Yourself, you employ people. If you had a change of staff every 12 months, would you be as profitable and as well respected as you are now?
No, not a chance. Not a chance.
Same with the college.
Yeah, I can totally understand that, actually, now you've said that. And we've had a chat privately as well, actually, and while we're on this kind of subject, I'll pick your brains on that one, because we've been talking about NVQs on the podcast, and actually that's not factually correct. So now we've got you here, and you know this inside out and back to front. Could you explain what it actually is as an apprenticeship system now, tying in that AM2 and the learning they do in college and the practical experience out with their employers? What is that actually as a whole?
Yeah, so you can still do an NVQ. So if you came back maybe as an older learner, and maybe you'd done a level 2 and level 3 in an evening, and then you got a job in the electrical industry and you were trying to piece together a qualification to allow you to effectively call yourself a qualified electrician, which you can call yourself that even if you'd never been to, I'll call myself a pilot. But I'm obviously not one, but to call yourself a qualified electrician in those terms, and there's all reasons why that would be right or wrong. You can do an MVQ at that stage, but we had, I'll get it around the right way, with the framework, and now we've got the standards, and the standards have an endpoint assessment. So plumbing have an endpoint assessment. Theirs is their qualification. I'm going to get it wrong because it's plumbing, but it's like their gas qualification at the end is their endpoint assessment. And to be an electrician, your endpoint assessment now is AM2S. So in order to get to that, you have to complete your standards, which require you to complete normally an underpinning knowledge, which is probably City and Guilds 5357, but can be an EAL equivalent. We used to do some EAL qualifications. I like EAL as much as I do City and Guilds. You do those underpinning units, okay, and then you go through and you build what people think is the MVQ, because it's effectively very similar to what it was before. You gather evidence through witness testimony, through photographic or video evidence. You get it through on-site assessment, people watching you carry out your work. You hit a number of units and wiring systems, and those wiring systems and units within those units are laid out for you, including health and safety. So you hit all of those wiring systems hopefully within your time. If you don't get timely completion, the college get a little knock on their money because you didn't complete in the time the government expected. I think that's a good thing. It doesn't help some colleges that go into 7 and 8 years. And then at the end of that, we say, have you got all your underpinning knowledge? Yes. Have you completed what people keep calling the MVQ, that workbook, evidence, log, knowledge on site, whatever you want to call it? Then no one's come up with a name, so that's why everyone still calls it an MVQ. It isn't. And then the employer says yes. The student says yes, and the college says yes, and they book AM2S. And then when they book AM2S, I recommend you do the pre-day before you go for it, is what I would suggest on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Matthew said on his episode, actually, that he was aware of kind of, I think it was on a night, his particular one, but definitely if you are coming up to AM2, especially been off college throughout the course of this year, make sure you are going on those preparation classes for doing the AM2, 100%. And also, you can check out Gary's content on GSH, because we can't not talk about that. That is the the biggest library of content any apprentice could ever wish to go and look at and learn from. We've spoken about this before. There's never been a better time to actually train to be an electrician, because
No, I agree with that.
While there might be issues within colleges and things, the fact you've got access to social media to speak with people like yourself and other electricians who are all happy to help people, and watch the videos on YouTube from yourself and others, you know, there's such a resource of information there, and the work you must have put in to make that available to people deserves a lot of credit. You know, it's off the scale brilliant, to be honest. And Matthew and his mates all used that. I would point them towards it when I was trying to explain stuff to them, because I'm not a teacher, and sometimes when they're asking technical questions, to go off and have that there is incredible. So you should be immensely proud of that. You know, it's something else.
That's really common, but I've also pointed you in the direction. I'd like some, you know, fault finding, level 3 testing, completing test result certificates. I see you've done an immersion eater one. Again, you go out too quick for me. I saw that tonight. I thought, I haven't watched that one yet. But you'll build your own content. Your followers will come. If you ignore that and just build your content and just build stuff, eventually you'll look back at the early stuff and think, I can't believe I did that like I do. Terrible efforts at trying it. But if you hadn't have done that, you wouldn't have got to where you are today. And you just keep adding them in. The beauty of me was I didn't want to do it. I'd never watched a YouTube video before I started. My wife convinced me to do it because I like to have something to occupy myself out of work. So I once dealt in shares for 2 years. I sold £125,000 worth of Star Wars figures on eBay by buying and selling them. Yeah. Obsessedly did that. And then I sort of finished doing that, and Cheryl went, well, you need something else to do. I was like, well, no, I don't. I want to stop. I just want to do one thing. So you ought to do a YouTube channel. I said, I don't watch YouTube. So it came from that. But because I only did it for my learners, and I just put, not very good content. Let's not call it rubbish. Not very good content out after not very good content out, because my evening class it dropped by 140 hours. So I had to go 140 hours quicker. How do you go 140 hours quicker? You produce stuff that they can watch to help them when you're helping other people. And it sort of just went from there. But I fluked it because at the same time, I think Thomas Nagy started his channel. And obviously, John Ward had already got a very established channel. We're nowhere near Big Clive. So Big Clive's more electronics based anyhow, but yeah, fantastic. And I didn't realise it was a bit like, and this is going to be terrible, a bit like Britpop. I joined it without knowing it. And then all of a sudden, you've got Chris from CJR Shop turns up, the best one to watch, and sorry, Nick, the best one to watch from an apprentice's point of view. You are his apprentice with him. And I used to say that to him. He'll stand there and he'll talk you through stuff because he's just that good. He came, Nick came, and then all of a sudden you just think, hang on, I'm in the middle of something. I didn't realise I was going to start this. I was in the middle of something that I shouldn't be in their world because I'm in a college world. But then they obviously all came to visit me and all the rest of it. I sort of got dragged along by them. And it was brilliant. It's flattering. It's amazing. But I only did it to help the learners at Tresham College, and I never thought anyone else would watch it. And when you get messages from people, it's brilliant. But I didn't concentrate. This is what's terrible maybe for your podcast. I never concentrated on apprentices because they actually hit that sweet spot where they were taken away from me. So where people would go to me, oh, why don't you do any stuff for AM2? And I was thinking, none of my learners, I don't teach anyone does AM2. And I was like going to work and thinking, well, I'll produce a video that helps the people I'm doing, because that was the rule when I started. I'll only do videos that help my own learners. I'll probably change it a little bit now. But then towards the end, we started getting towards doing stuff with the apprentices again. So I started picking the 5357 up again and going back in. And I thought, I probably missed a trick there because I was so pig-headed maybe that I'll only do stuff for me, that I was ignoring my level 3 testing rigs for a long time, going, well, I could be doing this, I could be doing that, because I was thinking, well, mine don't need it. So it almost felt like I was, not letting my own learners down, but not doing what I said when I originally started out. But I tried to address that, and with other stuff now.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone could criticise the content you've put out for apprentices because it's vast. And I don't know what we'd actually call you now in your role with Efix. Are you a content creator? Is that kind of where you're at there now? I watched you live last night with a coffee machine and Regulation Corner, which is just fantastic.
I do love regulation. We've got plenty more spoofs coming. We've already done points of view for the older viewers. We've done a points of view one. We've got plenty of other little gems in the back catalogue that we're going to start bringing out. That's going to try and be a show. So that will try and be humorous in places, really serious. Obviously, I gave a tribute to Tony Cable the other week and things like that. We also had somebody very close to where our unit was took his own life one week, and we've done some stuff for that and mental health. And I'm obviously a shrink, and I still am at the time. So of course I don't mind addressing those things, but it is going to try and be very light-hearted and the rest of it. My official title is I'm an editor, but if you look at all the other titles of the rest of the team, it's the worst one to have. So Joe's technical editor, in other words, he can read, so he's technical editor, and then the other two have got real highfalutin titles. So the worst title out of all of us is me. I'm the editor. So he's like, oh great, I'm the editor. So yeah, look at everyone else's title.
Ah, well, that's a fantastic resource you're putting together at Efix as well. And I was nearly sold on getting that coffee machine myself from Makita, and I won't be doing that now, having seen its poor performance. So, you know, I don't want the best thing, like you say, a bit of a gimmick. But I mean, talking about Efix, again, on the website there, you've got the know-how section where you can do some CPD. I've had a look at that myself. There's 4 or 5 things on there already. So even for practicing electricians, there's something there for us to go and do. And on top of that, you've got the Apprentice Hub, which is another great area for apprentices to go and look at. So is that something you're developing as well? Are you going to add on to that with more CPD and things, do you think?
I'd like to think there'll be another 30 or 40 CPDs next year. What's really good for the apprentices, so we'll go back to the apprentices, they have to do off-the-job training. So that's has to be hours accumulated. So what you say is there's 52 weeks in a year. You'd work 48 of them, of which you'll go to college. Of those 48 weeks, say 32 weeks. Well, the other 15 weeks or so, for 7 hours a week, those hours you've got to show that you've done effectively some learning. So if you're at work, they stopped you at work, they showed you how to use the drawings, and you spent some time maybe doing work with drawings or things like that, you can allocate that time for off-the-job training. So you can be at work and doing off-the-job training. But what they can't do is spend the 5 days you're not at college whacking in LED downlights, bending conduit. You've got to justify learning. So again, we'd like to think the free CPDs will help everyone. But when we've got a nice big catalogue of them, if you thought to yourself, hang on a minute, I'm a little bit short on the hours for actually proving them, every one of them's worth an hour's CPD. And it's not a fictitious CPD, that's registered with the company CPD. So it's a proper affiliated CPD certificate. And Joe's doing them. And if you ask me the 2 things I'm most proud of at Efix, CPD would be one of them. I think it's brilliant what Joe's doing. He's doing an amazing job. So I love it.
Yeah, I mean, Joe's stuff's incredible. I'm a big fan of all this stuff. I've seen some of his videos actually recently through Efix on the JCC lights, and he did one actually, was it on spotlights and fire rated ceilings? And there's things even like regular seasoned electricians don't consider, so everyone can get something from that. So, you know, that's really good. And one of the other questions I want to ask you, because again, you'll have great input on this, I know you will. I've asked every single person who's come on so far, it's if you were given, you're a 16, 17-year-old coming into an apprenticeship, and you're given sort of £100, £200 or so, and you don't have to mention brands, you can if you want. What would be your go-to kind of hand tool setup? What would you be looking at getting in your tool bag when you're first starting out? Because there's loads of people who don't actually know what they're going to need. And I know employers should provide stuff, and the colleges should, but what would you be buying yourself if you were 16, 17 again? Right,
okay, I just want to jump in here because I take a lot of stick for this. I'll probably buy a knife, a £200 knife, according to all my comments. So I'll address this everywhere I go. To start with, combination strippers like the ones Ideal Industries make and things like that, brilliant. They're 45 quid each. A college aren't going to be able to buy 10 sets of them, won't be able to buy 20 sets. If they bought 2 sets of them, the other 18 people would be waiting for them to come to them. So you won't get anything done. Every college can buy a knife. And the reason I use a knife in the early days is that when you score around the PVC of the insulated conductor, you're going to be, and somebody tried to tell me I'd fractured the copper and it would be weak. Well, I think I've got to press immensely hard to do so. So, of course, you go round and you're fine. When you take a pair of side cutters, and we do it, don't we? We take a pair of pliers side and just ping it off. Ping, ping, ping. When a lad or a female apprentice, full-time learner, female evening student, adult evening student, whatever we've got, clips a piece of cable down in one lesson into their job, first fits all, and then takes a pair of pliers or side cutters and then just snip, 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 and finds they've got a conductor about 3 centimetres long, I say take the cable out. If you use a knife, the only thing you're going to do is cut your finger. And when you've done that once, you won't do it again. Somebody said, I blocked them today. I don't block many people. They said, breach of health and safety at work act using a knife. Well, I've read that poster, and it is the size of the poster everyone sees at the wall. And I didn't see anywhere on there it states that I couldn't use a knife in my workshop. So you've been trained to use it. Yeah, use it. So a £200 knife, if I went buying a £200 knife, I'd say the ones you don't want to buy. So everybody wants to buy a fancy tools, I'd say locking off kit, proving unit, and voltage indicator. That would be your 200 quid gone. Because I think that's the three main things. We do safe isolation in the first 2 weeks with every level we have. So if you come as a level 1 learner, do safe isolation. If you come back as a level 2 learner, you do safe isolation in the first 2 weeks. Come back as a level 3 learner, you do it again in the first 2 weeks. Come as an apprentice. Apprentices are only taught at level 3. In the first 2 weeks, you do safe isolation. Yeah, it's that important, I think. And there's lots of people covered it on other podcasts of the tragic results of poor safe isolation. But if you haven't got a safe isolation kit, you buy yourself a really good toolkit, and mums, dads, aunties, uncles, nans, lady over the road wants an electrical job doing. You've got a nice pair of pliers, side cutters and screwdrivers to do the job, but maybe not the confirmation that supply is dead. And then that leads to something else. So that's what I'd say, those three tools.
Yeah, that's a great shout, and that's actually one of the things I've been pleased to do through Apprentice 1-to-1 is giving away some safe isolation kits, because, like you say, getting that into the minds of people when they're first starting out is so important, because it's easy to become like lax with these things and be taught bad examples by people who've perhaps been knocking around the game for too long, and to get that into the minds of people straight from the off, you always work dead before you become dead. That's something I always tell people who work for me. You don't come back from that, do you? If you get one zap from a bit of electricity in the wrong place, that's you gone, and it's all of the family and friends who have to deal with it afterwards. So really, really important.
Yeah, I've died twice getting electric shocks, and it ain't very nice. So yeah, it's not good at all.
No, it's not.
It's like you said, if it's the first thing you're thinking about, it's not an issue, is it? If it's the first tools you bought, you're going to love those more than any other tools. Oh, I bought myself a proving unit, voltage indicator, and safe isolation kit, locking off kit signs, etc. You'll probably have them for forever and a day, won't you? Forever and a day. You'd love the first pair of side cutters, pliers, and screwdrivers you have. You won't be knocking them through the ceiling. So
no, of course not. Yeah, of course not. You make a good point there. One of the other aspects of these chats I've been having, it falls onto the apprenticeship system and it doesn't, but it's to do with short courses, because there's a lot of older entrants to the industry, adult learners, people who are wanting to, especially at the minute when there's been a lot of job losses in other sectors, and kind of construction is supposedly one of the thriving areas of the economy as we move forward. So people wanting to become electricians. And there's people who got in touch with myself saying, can I do an apprenticeship? Is that route available to me as an older person? Or should I just pay for one of these short courses and go and get the qualifications I need? And Vicky, actually, who's got the next podcast out, she's an adult apprentice, so she had some really good insight in this. I just wonder what you thought. Do the short courses have a place for that kind of route? Or are they more for people who are maybe coming out of the military? Or, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I have one a week as well. So I usually have an adult learner contact me every week that I spend. Oh, we're back. So yeah, that I talk to and all the rest of it. And it's difficult because it's their decision, but I always put it into their context of their job. So I think I had a guy last week that worked in some sort of manufacturing engineering role. And I said to him, could someone do your job with 6 weeks training? Oh, no, not 6 weeks training. I said, but you're now going to apply the same procedure for what you can do, because you can use your hands, you're quite clever and all the rest of it. But surely there's somebody out there, a female that's quite clever, uses her hands, going to do your job in 6 weeks. And then it's that, okay. And then you sort of roll through that one. I've seen very few, but I have seen them adults get the apprenticeship route in. So those who listened on the podcast, there was a couple of air quotations there. So it's difficult because the government tend to like to fund under 24s. Okay, colleges like people that are under 24 because they want the full funding. If you're older than that, can you give up a day a week to go to college? Can you spend 4 years doing it? No, you want to do it quickly. There's no way of doing it quickly. It probably took you 4 years. It took me 4 years. It takes everyone about 4 years for that route. But don't knock the other routes in potentially. So my old evening students used to take 3 years to get to domestic installer level. So I've trained people that now work for themselves and are registered either with NAPIT or the NIC. I think one or two with Stroma, actually, now I say that. And they've got in. So they did a level 2. And then they did what we used to call the domestic installer, which is a level 3 over 2 years. It can bind a portfolio of evidence on site, very similar to what you would do under the standards. Don't mention MVQ. So you do that. And they'd have site visits from us. And then they'd take that qualification. It was recognised by NAPIT, recognised by the NIC, and then they would do their visit. They'd have to have all their risk assessments in place, their public liability, their safe isolation kit, 2 jobs they've done, usually a board change, a brand new circuit. They'd test them all through, and they would be, after 3 years, and a qualified domestic installer. But before anyone shouts at the podcast, I had about a 25% pass rate. That wasn't because the learners weren't good enough. It's as in attend and try. We wouldn't pass people we didn't think were good enough. So they put the effort in. They just wasn't up to it. They may have not quite done enough site visits. They may not have got enough evidence, and there was no, well, it'll be okay. We'll write some creative writing in that section. And we actually got a lot of heat at college for not having 80 to 90% pass rate. They wanted to close the course down. 100% pass rate is not a sign of a quality course. The people that come off that course more often than not work for themselves or went into the electrical industry. It wasn't a case of the qualification meant they carried on being a lorry driver. That was, the type of thing.
You make a really good point, and you've set an example there that if you do actually work with that system properly, it can be a viable route. I guess the problem is that there's training companies out there that maybe aren't doing it properly, and shortcutting people through into being electricians. And you made another good point there, and I agree with it entirely, that kind of the government are heavily focused on funding younger people into getting an education, sort of under 24s, and you can understand that kind of policy, but perhaps, certainly with the grants that have been paid to employers, I feel that shouldn't be based on age so much. And I know they had the policy through COVID where you could get this extra £2,000 and £1,500 based on your age. I just think those kind of things, that shouldn't really reflect somebody's age if we're trying to really encourage upskilling throughout the trade and attract people into the industry. Because, with smaller employers specifically, so I'm talking about one-man bands, the big driving cost to all of this, taking on apprentices and making that step, is the initial expense to it all. And if you can employ a young person and get a couple of £1,000 as opposed to getting £1,000 for someone who's maybe in the 30s, most of them would be going for that other option.
Okay, I'll spin that round. So I know what I was like between the ages of 16 and 45. So I've just turned 46. So you'd say 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, those sort of ages. I probably did some things that I weren't proud of. I probably drank too many drinks. I probably turned up at work, maybe not in a fit state to work. I probably didn't turn in because I drank too much the night before. I probably took time off that I shouldn't have had off. I didn't do any. I haven't had when I worked for the college, I had 1 day off in 19 years. So from the age of 27 to 45, I took 1 day off in that time. And that was because I couldn't walk. I couldn't drive my car. I went the next day, much to my wife's disappointment. So if you do take somebody off in a different age bracket, you can't guarantee it, but you might get a slightly more expensive person. You might get a slightly different character, but you're probably going to get somebody who realises it's their second chance. Education is wasted on the youth. I think my dad used to say to me, you're going to go for a different person. So you're going to have somebody who wants to come to work, maybe, who understands they've got a second chance, who wants to re-educate, and are probably going to work really hard. And then you go back to somebody who's 16, and I was 16 once, and I wouldn't have wanted to spend a lot of time with me when I was 16 in a van. So, there's two sides. And you've probably seen both, and even more so having to train your stepson as well. I mean, well done, Mark.
Yeah, no, cheers. That was a bit of a tricky one. And you've basically taken the words out of Vicky's mouth. That's exactly what she said when I asked her that question. That, if you're picking a more, I think she said mature candidate, that was her words, that you do get a bit more life experience and maybe a bit more reliability. And it's not all just on how much it costs you right at the beginning. And that's kind of the message I'm trying to push into some small employers who are out there kind of on the crest of taking an apprentice on, that don't rule out adult entrance to the industry just because you can't get as much money from at the beginning, because the payback in the long term for your business, could be far greater than employing a young person. It's all on the person really, and age shouldn't affect it too much.
And there's some sorry, Mark.
I was just going to say, and like you referenced earlier with Neil and the fact that he's got a thriving, growing business based on hiring and employing apprentices. You can take that path yourself if you're looking to build your business. It's a great route to try and grow a business through the apprenticeship system. Yeah,
and I've taught hundreds of fantastic 16-year-olds, and always forgive them for being their age. I mean, they'll let themselves down. We'll have a word, okay? They'll apologise, and then we'll move on. And I never hold a grudge. So whatever's happened, one minute we walk normally from the corridor back into the room, it's finished. just get on with it. If you make the same mistake again, yeah, disappointing, we'll have another word and all the rest of it. And when I come to parents' evening and that, used to have, because different areas of your work, you've have different variety of people come in, and maybe from some challenging backgrounds, and they may be enjoying what they're doing. They might never be an electrician, but try and make the course enjoyable. And yet to parents' evening, I never ever give any negatives. So sit down and then sort of, they're probably sat at many parents' evening and heard lots of things that are not positive about it. And I'll just talk about all the positives and what we could do moving forward and how we could get a job. And they'd look at you and they'd say, well, and I just look at them and I'd say, for sometimes I'd just say, yeah, but you know that. I said, that's nothing new. I said, I'm not bothered about that. I said, they're 16, they're 17, they're 18. They won't be like this forever.
Yeah.
Oh, right. And I just concentrate on all the positives. I'm being a parent myself, you sit down, this, that. And you just think, oh, great, lovely. You just walk away, don't you? You don't need that. You just need to hear about all the great stuff.
Yeah, no, that's actually one of the other things I was going to ask you about young people coming into the industry, because there's a lot of people my age and into the 40s who were saying, young people these days, they're just not engaged enough to want to learn and be apprentices. And I just think that's kind of human nature, because you heard it from older people in the 80s and in the 60s before that. They're always saying, like, the young generation, if it's the swinging 60s or the blooming drugs in the 70s and the 80s and whatever else, the rave in the 90s, there's always something, isn't there? And now it's smartphones and YouTube, and young people aren't really wanting to work with their hands. It's not what I've seen of late. There seems to be a lot of keen and really dedicated, hard-working young people who are looking to get a start. So when you were in the college, did you see bits of that, or was it, generally?
I had a double edge there, you see, because I created my own problem. So, of course, we first started out with a policy of your phone goes in a box, and we then had a fish tank. And we used to get a couple of old phones every year, and somebody would come in and just chuck a phone in a fish tank, and I'd see the whole place like this. It'll just float down to the bottom, and people would be like, "Wow, he's just ruined that phone." But then, of course, with the YouTube development, I needed people to go onto their phone, and they'd plug their headphones in, and other members of staff would come in and they'd sort of look, and then they'd come round and they'd be wedged their phone up. The job that I was testing was identical to the one in front of them. They got their headphones in, they're pausing it and doing it a section at a time. So if at any point they did look at Instagram, or at any point they did answer a text message, you can't have it both ways, can you? You want to embrace technology, you want to use the things they love using to help them learn. You got to take one for the team, really. They're going to use it for other things. And I'll be honest, I probably looked at my phone as well if I had a moment at some point as well, because obviously it was very busy at times. So yeah, I was pretty loose on that one. I mean, it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Wouldn't have it in the classroom though. So as in physically sitting down in the classroom, but in the workshop, it's the workshop, isn't it? So. Yeah,
of course. I mean, we're all guilty of stuff like that. I just think sometimes it's kind of human nature to knock the youth, and that seems to be happening a lot at the minute, in fairness. So I just wondered if you'd seen that in the college, and I don't think it's. My own opinion is it's not really that much of a big deal.
So. I was a right twonk.
Snap.
So
Snap.
Just. I wouldn't have somebody like me in my workshop or in my classroom. I'd be like, I don't need him. So you got to think, just 16, 17 or 18, just this one, isn't it? Otherwise you're rocking against a system you'll never win. Don't get me wrong. I mean, teaching wise, probably not the last 12 months when I've really sort of thought I was going, even though I was sad as anything. There's loads of sad videos coming out when I do leave. I probably mellowed a bit too early, but my wife said to me when I first started teaching, don't smile till Christmas. I said, right, okay. Well, she said, you can get softer, you can't get harder. So they come in day one, even on induction. If they came to do a pre-induction day, we'd have 8:30 till 4:30. Every single other trade, they'd be gone by 1. We'd go past 4:30 to prove a point. They'd have 40 minutes for lunch. If anyone was late, they got one pulled off them. So, to set that parameters from the start. So when people used to first come in, I'd be standing at the door, it'd be 9 o'clock, lock the door, just start my lesson. And then 15 minutes open the door, people would be standing there, well, where are you? And say, well, I was outside the door at 9 o'clock. I said, does the bloke who flies the plane or drives the bus, do they set their time by your phone, do they? I said, the lesson's underway. I said, you don't get to a lesson for 9 o'clock, it starts at 9 o'clock, you get there at 10 too. And there'd be that real like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not at school now, I'll bang him out. You see the body language come up, chest comes out. And I've seen it a million times. I come in, I have to apologise to the rest of the group for disturbing their learning, get on, come to the next day, somebody else is out there. And then all of a sudden, the ones that were in there before, they're like, oh, lovely, loving this, he's locked the door. They're in for a roasting, so they come in, they apologise. But if you set them parameters from the start, you don't take, don't have lateness, don't have rudeness, and all the rest of it. By the time you get to March and April, they haven't realised, you play a few songs in the workshop now, be your choice in music, not theirs. You start saying a few jokes that maybe are jokes that your school teacher wouldn't have said to you, or maybe, just bordering on a little bit of Gary humour. And by the end of it, they used to say to me, when you first come, Gaz, we didn't like you. I said, I don't care when you leave if you don't like me. I said, I need you to get a qualification. And I said, you're 16, 17 or 18, and you're probably not wanting to get that qualification. You're just coming in, but you're a good bloke. Thank you. No, you're great. No, okay, brilliant. He said, but when we first come in, we hated you. I said, well, that's just fine. And they'll always suggest somebody else that's always nice from the start. But then they'd sort of suggest that maybe they didn't push them as hard as they could towards the end.
Yeah.
But what's really good when they come back in year 2, and we had a balconied section then. So the year 1s were at the bottom, and the balcony section would often have the year 2s and year 3s. So of course it'll come September the 15th or whenever we start, and they're all coming in. Gaz, how's it going, mate? Shaking hands. Great summer. Yeah, still with your girlfriend? Oh, no, she's blown you out, etc. Yeah, or else they go up and get onto the balconies. And then the new one comes in, and then one's late, and you can see all the lot at the top like, oh, he's outside the door. Oh, he's dragged her back out. She's going to get a grilling. They walk in, you say the other side of the door. Say, what? Yeah, the other side of the door. And it's just brilliant because they think we went through that. We've got some respect now, and we understand that, Gaz is not the bad guy, he wants us to pass. And that's a lovely place to be in. And the apprenticeships, when you get them for 3 years, and I've had people that I'm the first person they ring when they pass an exam, so AM2. I'm the first person they ring when they get a job. So if they're a full-time learner, I've had them before, they've rang me up and they've said, I've got a job, Gaz. I've got the job I went for, brilliant. Thanks for helping with me interview techniques or whatever. And, you start welling up and that. And I said, how's mum and dad? Are they really proud? I haven't rang them yet. Yeah. And you think, wow, I was the first person you rang. And they've come in suits after interviews and that and stood there, or come in. I've had many female learners that have gone and done brilliantly as well. I took one of them to an award ceremony with her mum and dad and things like that. And she still contacts me now. She's off traveling the world and doing all the things she wants to do. And you just think it's wonderful that you was that part of their life, whether they wanted to be an electrician or not, that they sort of understood that you weren't the bad guy, you weren't the teacher, you were Gaz. And that's really nice. So that's possibly the bit I'll miss the most, I think.
Yeah, I can tell from listening to you talk about it there that actually means a lot to you, getting that, from seeing the apprentices succeed and make that step in their own lives, and then wanting to share that with you. That must be so rewarding. And I'm sure there's loads of people out there who have you to thank for a hell of a lot, and then probably people you've never even met without you even knowing. So you set that bar there, so people know I'm not taking any rubbish right from the beginning. You've got their respect later on, and they leave with a friendship with you, if that's the way it's gone, and that they've involved you in those kind of things. That's incredible to hear. And I want to thank you actually for coming on this podcast with me, because you didn't have to do that. And I want to let people know that you've actually been helping me out in the background with some tech stuff about microphones that'll work, and just encouraging me to keep going with this, because I've had stuff pop up along the way through what I've been doing, which has been frustrating and annoying, and you've been nothing but supportive through everything I've done. And you had no reason to be like that. We didn't know each other really before any of this started. Everybody who I've spoken to along this journey has nothing but good things to say about you. So thank you from myself to you for all of that. And I really appreciate and value that advice and input. And hopefully we can carry on. I can keep picking your brains with stuff that comes into Apprentice 1-to-1 if people are asking me questions. And if anybody wants to ask Gary himself, I'm sure he would be happy to answer. I will get him to say where you can find him, although you will already know because he's about 1 million times more famous than me. But where can people reach you, Gary, if they need to get in touch?
Possibly the best place people land on is Instagram. Everyone likes a bit of Instagram, don't they? And direct message me also on Facebook as well. I've got GSA Select on Facebook. On Twitter, I'm not a massive fan of Twitter. I go on Twitter, but I don't spend a lot of time on there. And of course, there's the YouTube channel. It's difficult to reach out on YouTube other than a question that can be directly answered, and sometimes if it can't be directly answered, I do ask people to come through. I like to speak on the phone really sometimes with the bigger types of questions. But we know that our phrase is #BetterTogether, and the more people that pull together, and we're not a divisive people. I just want our industry to do the best we can. So if you create tons of great content for electricians and apprentices, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. It's just another person doing great stuff in our industry. There's no, oh, I don't want Mark to make a success of it. I've already talked privately about videos. I think that'll be very, very key to the people you're trying to help, and stuff that I can't make either as well, that would be very beneficial. I think sometimes we've got to be careful not to stand on each other. If there's a video out there, sometimes John Ward's done a fantastic video, or David Watts has done a fantastic video. You think, well, what's the point? I mean, I could repeat a similar video, but they've done a great job of it. So just try and find another area. Your immersion heater testing, brilliant. I haven't watched it yet. I know it's going to be brilliant, and I'm going to measure the resistance. You're going to do all that stuff. Fantastic. Maybe you could go on and explain how 50 volts could appear on the tank. The resistance, the element that's corroded. You might have done it in your video. The corroded element, it comes out. That's what that might be. The line conductor, all that resistance, all the resistance of the water gets to the tank is at 50 volts. You touch the tank, bang. That's the problem. It's because people always say to me, "How do you get 50 volts? It's 230 volts. How can it drop to 50 volts?"
Yep.
The immersion heater tank is probably the best way to explain it. I always think.
That's a good show.
Resistance elements. Yeah, so I could draw it, but if you'll buy a tank, you explain it, the video's done. It's better together. It's so much better together. I mean, there's some great people out there. I've got some lovely people in my phone. I can ring them all the people that these people you'll probably have on, your Nick Bundys, your CJRs, your David Savory. So I still call him David. Nobody else does. They've all lost the respect for the greatest entertainer on the electrical industry.
Did you see his rap while you mentioned him?
I'm crying with laughter. And then he followed it when he fell on the floor. The next one with the AFDD videos when he went to how many bottles of beer, and then he's having. I'd rang him. I think I'd rang him the week before. I'd helped him on that video because I sent him some of the footage for that. And then he said in the video, didn't he? Any of these pretty boys start waltzing around with these, you watch me, I'll be in the comments. So I didn't suggest I'll be in the pretty boy bit, but I sort of messaged him and went, Dave, I've actually shot a video on a 17-way AFDD board, and he's only got about 8 or 9 in his. I said, I haven't released it yet. I said, do I fall into that category of people you're going to murder in the comments? And he was like, nah, Gaz, no, you're right, Gaz. I was like, oh.
He's giving you a free pass.
Otherwise, I would have helped him. No, he's incredible people, just incredible. Even people like Rich Heppel, Art Smart. You contact him if you want smart technologies. A young person who's completing their apprenticeship. Again, isn't there a female Art Smart waiting to happen? Isn't there that sort of system? Somebody out there who's going to go, hang on a minute, Rich Heppel's done that. I could do a female version of Rich Heppel. Put a twist on it, etc. It'd be brilliant. And there's not enough ladies in our industry. I think up until my very last 2 years were the only years I never taught female apprentices and female learners full time or evening. So the last 2 years, but that was probably down to the demographic in which I worked in. So I moved to an area that was a little bit more financially challenged within the Tresham group, and it had a better college with more what you would suggest were historically female-orientated subjects they could have selected. So the last couple of years, I didn't have any female learners, which was a disappointment because I think a group's always better with females in it, whether they be older or younger.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to attract anybody into the electrical industry, and there's no reason at all why females couldn't succeed being electricians as males could. And it's interesting you mentioned about Rich, because he lives literally 30 minutes away from me, and I'm going to meet him actually in the new year. We're going to finally get together. I've spoken to him a few times on social media, and we both said the other day, what are we playing at? We're like half an hour away, let's get together. So once COVID's over, because I think North Yorkshire Police had turned me back at the minute, we're going to get together and have a chat and see what we can work out.
One of the nicest blokes in the industry, and I didn't know him until I did Efix. So again, he texted me the other day. We got a ring. We got to get together. Gaz, when we get together, and that's not a business relationship because potentially our two business ideas now we're probably not going to work together in a business relationship at the minute. And I'm really good with his AOS training centre and all the rest of it. But it's that we met each other, we liked each other. Yeah, if I rang Rich, he'd answer the phone, which I think's excellent. I mean, so you don't answer your phone. I ring a few times where you answered, but Rich does.
Yeah, I'm a nightmare. You're not the only person to say that. I'm really bad for answering my phone. But I want to thank you for taking your time this evening to come and chat with me. I really, really appreciate you've been an absolute legend, as always. And thank you again for all the apprenticeship help through the course of this quest I've been on, if that's what I'm going to call it. And yeah, I look forward to watching more of your content and keeping in touch. Cheers, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.